So our next stop is Launcells and to English St Swithin Parish Church. Its present blueprint mainly dates to the late 15th century, with some parts dating to the 13th and 14th centuries. There's a church noted on the site in the 1086 Domesday Book, likely built upon a Celtic monastery. It was originally dedicated to St Andrew, but it was rededicated to St Swithin in 1321 AD, with the earlier dedication likely forgotten. The northeast of Cornwall, beyond the River Ottery, was settled by the English relatively early, and thus most churches here adopted non-Celtic patrons, most commonly Andrew or George. Perhaps at the time of the rededication, Swithin simply had more resonance within the local community, and or St Andrew was too Scottish. I mean, these are just possible reasons, I don't actually know. Ultimately, something made the community choose Swithin over Andrew, and the reasons for doing so may never become clear. Now, some of the wall paintings here aren't technically medieval, but they are unusual, hence their inclusion in the talk. While it's largely acknowledged that ecclesiastical wall paintings are emblematic of medieval Christianity in Britain, these wall paintings are estimated to have been created in about 1680 to 1690 AD, and thus post-Reformation and after the Civil War. The southwest wall was conserved in 1988 by Anna Hulbert, and the western wall in 1999 by Anne Ballantyne. Fabulous. There is possibly also an additional medieval wall painting nearby, which may suggest there was an earlier medieval campaign, over which a secondary campaign has since been painted. Some of the revealed wall paintings include two angels, Abraham and Isaac, the vault of heaven, and two unknown men next to a horse. A medieval wall painting of St Swithin has been suggested, but as yet unrevealed. Given the banning of Catholic drapings during various legislative onslaughts against the church in the early modern period, and by that I mean circa 1500 to 1750 AD, it seems likely that there once would have been more paintings dedicated to saints, which have since been covered over. While all the currently revealed paintings have been attributed to the 17th century, it is actually likely that the revealed images are associated with at least two different painters and likely two campaigns. So when you have a look at it in a moment, just look at the difference in quality of the faces. Remember, if the faces are the mark of the painter, then the two men with a horse appear almost rudimentary in comparison to the fine details of the robes of the angels, or of Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac on an altar. I would suggest a 15th century dating for Abraham and Isaac. In contrast, the two figures with the horse also wear Stuart-style costume, which certainly seems to align with the 17th century date of execution, especially given the writings on the north wall of the church showcasing the letter of thanks sent by Charles I in 1643, thanking his loyal Cornish subjects at a time when most of Cornwall were staunchly royalist. The painting of Isaac's sacrifice may have been revealed purposefully, perhaps as an allegory for local support for Charles I, hoping that he too, like Isaac, will be saved by divine intervention. Who knows? These designs, especially the fonts, certainly seem a lot later in the timeline of wall paintings than less detailed earlier designs in other churches. When the Historic England listing refers to paintings on two different layers of plaster, is it referring to a pre-Reformation and a post-Reformation campaign, or two different post-Reformation campaigns? Given the rarity of such an action post-Reformation, there are certainly likely to have been, whether still existing or not, earlier, more saint-orientated medieval wall paintings at Launcells. And moreover, given the stark differences in execution, I believe we are certainly seeing two different campaigns, with the two men and the horse being the latest to be completed. Which begs the question, was it an intentional painting commissioned by the church, or graffiti which has stood the test of time and has been absorbed into the other campaign as part of it? And if so, at which point does graffiti become a social commentary to be preserved rather than an antisocial nuisance? In total, are we looking at two campaigns or possibly three? These questions could be answered by using optical coherence tomography, OCT, and or macro X-fluorescence to reveal previous paint layers. And I've also noted as well, we can see how the paintings do seem to continue on this wall, because we can see, so I don't know if you remember, but St. Christopher over at Puffle was wearing that kind of floppy beret type hat. So I think here we've got a floppy beret type hat, what would have been the face. You've got sort of a ruff of the collar, the sort of chest panel, torso panel, and then an arm coming out briefly this way. But there's not really enough to be able to work out what saint it is, because that's not really enough sort of detail really to be able to work out what saint it is. But I do think there's probably a painting there as well. Associated features for St Swithin include the nearby eponymous Holy Well, restored during the Victorian period. Its location likely signifies that there was once a Celtic monastery on the site, which we see with a lot of the Holy Wells. And just like with the church, it was originally dedicated to St Andrew. Interestingly, St Swithin is particularly venerated in English folklore, and like St Olaf, also in Norwegian folklore. So I thought that was particularly interesting because you've got a dedication to St Olaf just down the road. He's very big, obviously. He's the patron saint of Norway. He's very big in Norwegian folklore, but actually St Swithin also is as well. After the Norman conquest, dedications to more universal saints were adopted, particularly with the more northerly churches. And so just to finish, I'm going to give you an extract, like I did at the last church. Some notes from an article by Nigel and Hugh Reed, and thank you so much for these, by the way. Below the painting are two inscriptions. These are hard to read, but it's believed that they are either a copy of or taken from the same as yet unknown source, as an inscription on a 17th century overmantel above a fireplace in 90 High Street, Oxford, on a house dating from about 1613 AD. The overmantel also carries a carved description of the sacrifice of Isaac, and the inscription in the Oxford house reads, and this is in Old English, so I'll say it as best I can, "Behold, the father of the faithful seed was here approved to be sound indeed, for being warned of God to sacrifice his son Isaac, most precious in his eyes. Forthwith obedient was at his command, and slays his son had not God stayed his hand. The anticipation of Christ was he in this, for God his only son did slay for us, and if Christ crucified thou desirest to see, this to a Christian crucifix may be, not for to worship as papists intent, but only for thy chamber's ornament." So what's left here, so the wording here has the two verses in reverse order, and the first verse seems to be slightly different. So they've got the second bit coming first. So the anticipation of Christ was he in this, for God his only son did slay for us, and if Christ crucified thou desirest see, this to a crucifix may be, Christians not for to worship as papists, but only for the church's something, and there's some words missing, so we don't have the whole thing. But that's interesting to note that there's very, very strong similarities between the two. So thank you very much for sending that to me. That was really interesting. I thought you guys. This is the church I know least about, and I've never visited before, so I'm looking forward to exploring these paintings in the flesh with you. And what I didn't know before coming here is that there's another bit of one here, so that's been very exciting. And now I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about the history of the church.